Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem, Be'ezus Hashem Yisbarach, as we broadcast from our flagship station here at the Aguda Space Yisrael Bezev of Fairways Lakewood, always beginning with continued appreciation to TorahAnytime.com for giving us the magnificent platform to teach Torah to 187 countries, to Kol Haloshen for their global dissemination to people that don't use more advanced technology, to Torah Communications Network, YouTube, Spotify, our Zoomers, our attendees, our digital recorder, subscribers. Welcome, everyone. Tonight we have two very special sponsors. We're sponsored by Ezra and Lisa Batesh on the occasion of the 20th yahrzeit of Rivka Bas Ena, and Neshama should have a lichtige Gan Eden. She should be a Mlitzas Yosher for her family, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael, and there should be Hatzlacha for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. We're also sponsored by my dear Talmud, Beirich Goldwasser and family on the occasion of his wife's grandmother's yahrzeit, Malka Bas Yisrael. Her neshama should have an aliyah. She should be a Mlitzas Yosher for her family, for all of us and all of Klal Yisrael. To sponsor next week's Shiur, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. The Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram. So here's a very interesting question. You know, it's like such a basic question. The second parsha in the Torah is Eila Toldos Noach. It's not called Toldos, it's called Noach. And now here we have a parsha, Eila Toldos Yitzchak, and it's not called Yitzchak, it's called Toldos. So you'll say, well, Rabbi Weiss, you can't have two Toldos. So okay, so then call the first one, Eila Toldos Noach, call it Toldos. And the second one, call it Yitzchak. Why do we call Eila Toldos Noach, Noach, and Eila Toldos Yitzchak, we call Toldos? It's a very basic question. So then you'll say, oh, you know what, I'll tell you, Rabbi Weiss, you know why? Because it's coming to tell you that the Iker Toldos saying Shel Tzadikim Ma'asim Tovim. So that, therefore, since we want to tell you that the Iker Toldos of Noach is Noach, so we call it Noach. So to the contrary, call it Toldos, and that would let us know that the Iker Toldos is going to be Noach. So I found the question. I found the question in a sefer called Toras Devash. And he gives a very fascinating answer. It's very fascinating. He says, Parshas Noach, what does it speak about? It primarily talks about Noach. How for 120 years he built the Teva, how he gathered food into the Teva, how he gathered all the animals, how he fed all the animals in the Teva, what happened afterwards, that he drank wine, and what happened, and then he offered all the karbanos, you know, so it's all about Noach. So therefore the parsha is called Noach. What's this week's parsha about? It's primarily all about Yaakov and Esav. So that's why it's called Toldos. It's not called Yitzchak. It's not primarily about Yitzchak. It's primarily about Yaakov and Esav, the Toldos. I think it's a home run. I really think it answers the question. We have also a very interesting chidah over here. You know, the chidah says, it says Eila Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, and then it says Avram Holides Yitzchak. So the chidah brings down from a kuntris ksav yad. So obviously he had a manuscript of an ancient ksav yad, which he cites that the disciples of Reb Yehuda Chassid, the famous great Reb Yehuda Chassid, said that their Rebbe, Reb Yehuda Chassid, cited that Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov lived together for 15 years, And they learned for 15 years together for 15 hours a day. In the Ksav Yad it says that they learned 15 hours a day, and the other 9 hours of the day they spent sleeping and praying and eating. So the obvious question is that if you do the arithmetic, it is a big question. Because we know that Avram had Yitzchak at the age of 100. And Yitzchak had Yaakov at the age of 60. So that means when Yaakov was born, Avram was 160. And Avram died at 175. So that would mean that Yaakov had to start learning when he was born, the day he was born, from the crib. He would have to start learning 15 hours a day if they were to learn together for 15 years, 15 hours a day. So you'll say, whoa, that's a big kasha. So the Eitzer HaPlois, which I've quoted here many times, the Eitzer HaPlois says, yup, that's the way it is. Yaakov started learning 15 hours a day the day he was born. And the truth of the matter is you shouldn't be surprised. Because we know that it says, Vayitzrei tzitzu abanim bekirba, that Yaakov, as soon as he saw Beis Medrash Shem Ve'er, he wanted to go out. So everybody asked the kasha, why do you want to go out? He was learning from a malach. So everybody answers either that he wanted to get away from Esav, or that he wanted Amelus B'Torah, because without Amelus B'Torah, you don't remember your learning. So therefore he wanted to toy, that's why a baby doesn't remember its learning. Or he wanted to learn Almanas Lasais in order to do. Whatever the reason is. But you see, he was ready just to continue his learning. And that's what he did. He came out and he continued his learning. Now, this, by the way, just to put this in your, give you a framework, you should never think for a second that when it says, Vayav Yitzchak es Esav, Berivka Heves es Yaakov, that Yitzchak didn't love Yaakov. I mean, here we have that Yitzchak learned with Yaakov and Avram together for 15 years, when Yaakov was just 1 day old. So Yitzchak very well knew who Yaakov was. There's no question about it. What it means that Vayav Yitzchak es Esav, we're going to talk about in length later tonight. Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram hoiled es Yitzchak. So here, Rabbi Yaakov Naiman says a very interesting thing. Very interesting thing. I already made a bracha, Rabbi Isai. He says that there's 3 types of children. There are children that the parents are not very proud of the way the children behaves. But the children still are proud of their parents. You know, you have a child that you wish the child would be a lot better. So the parent is not proud of the child, but the child is very proud that they have a chosh of a parent. Then there could be a situation even worse where the parent is not proud of the child, and the child has strayed so far that the child has no nachas from the parent. The parent is living in the dark ages. And the best scenario is where the parent is proud of the child and the child is proud of the parent. And that's what you have over here. V'te'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram hoiled es Yitzchak. So Avram is proud of Yitzchak, and Yitzchak is proud that he has a father like Avram. And the Chidah says that you see that that's the sentiment of the pasuk, because the Medrash says, Zeu she'amar atorah zekenim b'nei banim, the crown of the Zayda is chashuv grandchildren, v'teferes banim avoisam, and the splendor of the children is their father. So you see that in a good situation it goes both ways, that the parent is proud of the child and the child is proud of the parent. Vayeta Yitzchak laHashem l'noichach ishtoi ki akorahi. And Yitzchak stormed the heavens about his wife that she was barren. So we see that Yitzchak did different than Avram. Right? Avram prayed for himself. Hine anoichi hoylech hariri uven meshek beisi damesek Eliezer. He only prayed for himself. And we know that that's what Sarah Imenu had a big taina. Chamasi alecha. My wrath upon you, my outrage upon you. Why did you only pray for yourself? Why didn't you pray for me? So I always had learned that here Yitzchak, learning from this, made sure to pray for his wife. L'noichach ishtoi ki akari. However, the Griz from Brisk, the Griz from Brisk says it's completely two different things. It says, in the case of Avram, Sarah Imenu, it says, Ein lo velod. She didn't even have a uterus. When a woman doesn't have a uterus, so that's what's called the Tfilah Shav. Gemara says in the 9th parakah, it's a Mishnah in the 9th parakah of Brachas, that after the baby is already developed, you don't daven for the sex of the child. Up to 40 days you can, because Abam Yom Liyitzir Savlad. But after that, to pray for the gender of the child is a Tfilah Shav. So you don't daven for something that is Keneged HaTeva. So Avram didn't daven for Sarah because she didn't even have a uterus. On the here, however, it says, Ki Akari, she was an Akara. Sometimes an Akara has a child. So therefore, that's why Yitzchak was Mispala. Vatelech lidroish es Hashem. So it says that we know that Rivka had this revolution inside her. When she passed a church, the baby jumped out. When she passed Beis Medrash, the baby jumped out. And she thought maybe she had a sick child. It didn't dawn on her that it was twins. Remember, she was an Akara. They didn't have fertility in those days. They didn't have organizations like a time, She didn't think it was twins. She thought she had a sick child, schizophrenic child. So it says, "Vatelech lidroish es Hashem." And what does Rashi say on "Vatelech lidroish es Hashem"? Rashi says, "L'beis midrashay shel Shem." She went to the Beis Medrash of Shem to ask. Shem was Malki Tzedek Melech Shalem, the son of Noach, one of the Gdolei Adar, the famous yeshiva of Shem Ve'ever, and she went to ask. So the Torah Zav, which is a major pirush on Chumash, Kadmon, the Torah Zav says that this is a fulfillment of what it says in the famous answer to Shimon HaMtzaini. Remember, Shimon HaMtzaini used to dash in every S in the Torah, and when he got to Es Hashem Alikecha Tira, he said, I must be wrong. Because what could be on the same plane with the Rabbeinu Shalom? At Sheba Rabbi Akiva v'Doresh Es Hashem Alikecha Tira l'Rabbis Talmidei Chacham. That Es Hashem Alikecha Tira comes to include Talmid Chacham. Now, how is that? A Talmid Chacham, a mere mortal, a mere flesh and blood, is on the same plane as the Rabbeinu Shalom? The answer is a Talmid Chacham contains within him Torah. And he's a embodiment of Torah. And Torah is Hashem. Because Kucha Barichu V'Araisa Chadhu. So therefore, says the Torah Zav, here too, that's what the S refers to. Vatelech Lidrosh Es Hashem. She went to seek out the representative of Hashem in this world. And therefore she went to the Talmud Chacham. She went to Shem. It's very important to know this, that a Talmud Chacham is considered to be Hashem's representative in this world. You know, it says, a famous Gemara in Masechtas Brachos, Oizvei Hashem yichlu. If you forsake Hashem, you'll be destroyed. So the Gemara says, Zeh maniach sefer Torah v'yatza. That's somebody who walks out of shul while the Sefer Torah is open with disregard to the Kavod Torah. Now, why is that considered Oizvei Hashem? It's Oizvei Torah, but why is that Oizvei Hashem? It's the same idea. Because Kucha Barichu V'Araisa Chadu. Hashem and the Torah is one. The Torah is the Das of Hashem. It's one. And walking out on the Torah is walking out on Hashem. And therefore, in the same way, the Gemara says in Bava Basra, Kama tipshoy, how foolish are people, they stand up for a Sefer Torah and they don't stand up for a Talmud Chacham. A Talmud Chacham is a living Torah. And a Talmud Chacham is a living Torah. That means that he's a living manifestation of Hashem. Because Kitchabirichu, the Torah, V'Araisa Chadhu. And therefore, Rabbi say, this is what we refer to as Das Torah. You know, people say, Das Torah, they make a big thing about Das Torah. But that's what it means. Vatelech lidrosh es Hashem. She went to seek out Hashem. A person that absorbs Torah in all their pores, Torah Lishma, is es Hashem alikecha tira l'rabos talmidei chachamim. That's Das Torah. That's why we value Das Torah. That's why we're vatal Das to Das Torah. Just have to know what's pure Das Torah. But when you know what's pure Das Torah, that's Vatelech Lidrosh es Hashem. So of course, this begs the question, why did she go to Shem? Why did she go to Avram? Avram was a Galadar. And the Maskil David asks, as does Rabbeinu Paltiel, why didn't she go to her husband Yitzchak? Yitzchak is also one of Gedolim. I mean, after all, it's his baby. Why didn't she go to Yitzchak? So it's interesting. Remember, this is before Matan Torah. The rules weren't all written down and clear yet. It says Avram was Mekayim Kol HaTorah Kula, but it's Rivka has the right not to know everything. You know, she's coming from the family of Besuel and Lavan. She was going to ask a Shaila if she could take a kais shel samim, if she could drink something to cause the child to be aborted. She thought she had a sick child. And she felt that it would be better to ask somebody that's not Negei B'davar, not a Zayda, not a Tata. That's an answer, Rabbeinu Paltiel. But there's another approach over here. Because one would imagine that it was already known in the Jewish circles about not doing an abortion. I mean, look, one is no, Rabbeinu Paltiel says that's shot. But there's another approach over here. And the other approach is that Rivka understood children don't usually behave this way. They don't run to the church. They don't run to base medrashes. It's a baby. She understood that she was given a message. And very astutely, she said, maybe it's a message for me and not for the rest of my family. So she went outside of the family. And, this is our avos and imais. Everything is done with great thought. At the end, it changed the course of history. She was correct. Because what did Shem tell her? Virav yavoy tzor. That the older one will serve the younger one. If Yitzchak would have heard this, he would have never given a bracha to Yaakov thinking he was Esav that have a gvir la'achiv. He would have never gave a bracha to Esav that you should be a gvir over your brothers if he heard this nevuah of Rav Yavoy Tzar. So he wasn't supposed to hear it. It wasn't for him. We have to know that, people do things. They have to do things with deliberate thought. Now, part of, and by the way, I've said this many times, that's why the name Rivka is the same letters as Kirba inside her. Because the information that she got from inside her helped to guide her to get the brachas for Klal Yisrael and for Yaakov. Now the pasuk then goes on to say, "Ushnei lu'umim mimei ayich yiparedu," and two nations from your womb will divide. They will go in different directions. Now this nevuah of Shem is a tremendous lesson that the life of a guy and the life of a yid are in two different directions. This is, people say, yeah, I'm very friendly with my Goyish neighbors. That's fine. You have to know, though, that they're a different planet. They're a different universe. In Havdalah we say, Hamavdul bein or l'choshech bein Yisrael la'amim. The difference between a yid and a guy is the difference between light and darkness. What are the two directions? The yid goes towards Olam Haba and the guy goes towards Olam Hazeh. It's a completely different direction. And it's interesting because in this parsha, it's so interesting. In this parsha, there's a powerful lesson from the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim says on the pasuk where Yaakov said to Esav, "I'll give you the soup, the tomato soup, the lentil soup. Sell me the bechar." So what does Esav say? Hinei anochi haylech lamus. I'm going to die. V'lama zeli bechar. The bechar comes with a lot of responsibilities. I'm going to die. What do I need bechar for? So the Chofetz Chaim says the reaction of death causes mamish diametrically opposite reactions in a yid and a guy. A yid thinks of Yom HaMisa and he says, okay, I got to start cracking. I got to start moving because this world is a praise der lifnei olam haba. I'm losing time to prepare for my nitzchias. A guy says, oh, time's running out. I better eat and be merry because tomorrow I might die. So by Esav, Misa has the opportunity. I have very, very little time left. I want to enjoy life. And Yid says, I have little time left. I better use it profitably. And we said that's the difference. That by an Arab it says mitzachek, and by Yid it says yitzchak. A mitzachek is to laugh now, and yitzchak means to laugh in the future. And we know it really is a remarkable pasuk. And most people don't feel this way. But the sentiment of the pasuk, and the correct sentiment, is toiv leleches lebeis ha'avam leleches lebeis hamishta. It's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a wedding. Most people say, I'd rather be happy. But going to a house of mourning gets a person to think, time is running out. And that's v'achayiten elibay. Now, by the way, this idea that there's two ways to spin the thought of death is inherent in the Gemara in the beginning of Brachas. The Gemara over there says that when all else fails in your battle with the Yetzer Hara, the last ace to pull out of your sleeve is Yizkor lo Yom HaMisa, to think of the day of death. But that's the last step. If it's so powerful, why don't you do it first? The answer is, the Gemara over there says you should incite the Yetzer Hara, tov against the Yetzer Hara. If not, you should learn. If not, you should be makabel ol mach shemayim with Kriya Shema. If not, you should think of Misa. You don't do it first, because if you do it first, it could have the opposite reaction. It could be Esav's reaction. Oh boy, I better chop another pleasure because time's running out. Here we live in a retirement community in Fairways. So it's a 55 plus community. There's a lot of 55 plus communities springing up all over the world, in Eretz Yisrael, in Florida. Right? There's a lot of 55. People say, 55 plus community. It's already, advanced age. So when a person thinks about that, what does it cause? It's supposed to cause us to say, okay, time to get to work. The Chavetz Chaim says that's what it's supposed to cause us to do. It's two different directions, completely. So we know that Esav came out red. Yetzer Rishon Admaini. So there's a Medrash Avak here. The Medrash Avak here says something which sounds initially bizarre. Really bizarre. It's one of the reasons why Esav came out red. It says, Ad shehu b'meyai imay shasa damni dasa. While he was in his mother's womb, he drank all her blood. Original vampire. Drank all her blood. So, Shelley's looking at me like, huh? So Rav Mindus was a big guy, Rav Mindus. Rav Noach Mindus. Rav Noach Mindus explains that the Gemara says that the milk that a mother nurses with is manufactured from her blood. Dam nechar v'naseh chalav. Esav was so diabolical that he wanted Yaakov to die of hunger. So he drank his mother's blood that she shouldn't be able to produce milk. And he wasn't worried about himself because remember, he came out also, as the Tayim Yonasan Ben Azil said, he came out with kochi vishani. He already had teeth and molars. So he had no problem eating. So he felt, let me drink up the blood. She won't be able to nurse him, he'll die. And don't be surprised, he really tried to kill Yaakov. And that's what it says. V'yoda yochezes ba'kev Esav, when he was coming out, Yaakov's hand grabbed the heel of Esav. Esav already had a murderous heel. You see, Esav had already destroyed his mother's womb. That's why Rivka, when she had the twins, she was all of 23. She was 23, and she never had children afterwards. Because Esav destroyed her womb. That's another reason she was called Rivka, Kerba. She knew who Esav was. And then with his murderous heel, he saw the fontanelle of Yaakov, and he said, let me finish the job, destroy all the competition. And his heel was coming straight down to crack Yaakov's skull. But Hashem made a miracle, Yoda Yechezes Bakev Esav. That's one of the reasons why he was called Yaakov. You know, we give names after miracles, like Eliezer, Elikei Avi Bezri, V'yatzilein Micherev Paro, that Hashem saved Moshe Rabbeinu by turning his neck into marble from the executioner of Paro. So that's Yoda Yechezes Bakev Esav. So Esav was already actively trying to kill Yaakov. And one of the ways he tried was to drink her blood so she would have no milk. And Raminda says, I'll prove it to you. You never find by any of the other imais that they had a nursemaid. But it says, Thomas Devorah Menekes Rivka. Now most people learn that Pshat is that Devorah was the nursemaid of Rivka herself. But says Ramindis, no. Rivka needed a Menekes. She needed a wet nurse because she wasn't able to nurse. So really an eye-opening Pshat in the Parsha. Now, then we know that he said, Esav showed that it was a big Baal Taiva. Give me min adam hazeh. He saw Yaakov was preparing the Sudas Havrah, the mourner's meal for Yitzchak, and Esav came hungry from the field, and he said, Haliteli no, spoon down me min adam hazeh. I gotta have that tomato lentil soup. The aroma is so good. Oh, I gotta have it. Al kain korish mayeda. And because of that, he was called always Edom. Right? This is Golas Edom. Reb Shlomo Bloch, Zecher Tzadik Livrach Zchus Yagen Aleinu, says you see the difference between getting a good name and getting a bad name. To get a good name takes years. Years. Avram got his name Avram only when he was 100. Yaakov got his name Yisrael only when he battled Samuel himself, the angel of death himself. To get a good name is very hard. To get a bad name is very easy. Esav had one incident with a tomato soup, and he got himself a name. It's a big lesson. You know, Keser Shem Toiv Oila Al Gabein. The crown of a good name towers over all the crowns. There's a reason why it's such a towering crown. Because it's a lifetime mission. It means a person always has to be careful about their interaction with people. It means that a person has to always think, not just to do the right thing. To get the crown of a good name, it's not enough to be right. That's why the pasuk says, "V'yisem nikiyim me'Hashem u'miyisrael." It's not enough to be Naki Ma'Hashem. Naki Ma'Hashem is to do what's right. But you also have to be Naki in the eyes of people. So a crown of a good name is it's not enough to do what's right. You have to be beyond suspicion. That's a lifetime mission. You know, when I think of a crown of a good name, I think about my first Rebbetzin, Aleh Shalom, Miriam Liba Bas Reb Aaron. You know, Irving Fishbaum said about her a real good testimony. If you didn't love her, it means you didn't know her. And that's a true thing. You know, when Rabbi Shafran wrote for one of the papers, they asked him to write words of eulogy about her. So at her funeral, it was estimated that there was 1,600 people. So he said that when you went out of the huge Young Israel, where there were 1,200 people, you went into the masses outside, you heard swirls of conversation, and everyone was saying a hesped over her. Everybody was saying a Miriam Libby story. That's because of a lifetime of working on a Keser Shem Tov. Let me just explain to you for a moment what that means. When she answered the phone, she covered the caller ID. She didn't want to know, because she wanted to answer with the same pleasure, whoever it was. That gives a person a Keser Shem Tov. When it was a woman on the phone, I'll never forget it. When it was a woman on the phone, she answered to everyone, "Hello, gorgeous." That's how she answered. "Hello, gorgeous." That's a lifetime of activity. She would say, "Unless my family needs me," and that's why she didn't have a cell phone, because she didn't want to be busy when her family needed her. She never had a cell phone. All her life, she never had a cell phone. But otherwise, she was available to everyone as if it was the same. It's a person has to work an entire life to have a Shem Tov. So now we talked about how Esav sold the birthright for the tomato soup. But if you actually look at the pasuk, it says, "V'Yakov nosan le'Esav lechem u'nezid adoshim." He gave bread and the lentil soup. V'yochel v'yesh. He ate and he drank. V'yokam v'yelech. He got up and he left. V'yivez Esav esav b'chayr. So the first question is, Esav only asked for the soup. Why did he give him bread? The second question is, what does the pasuk say? Vayokam vayelach. He got up and he left. Was that adding anything? The third question is that we know the Medrash says that Esav came from the field va'achzosoi bulmus. He was seized by a ravenous hunger, which could be lethal. And therefore that begs the question, so then maybe the deal for the firstborn right doesn't go through. Because if it was pikuach nefesh, then he had the right to grab it. He doesn't owe anything for the soup. He could steal it. So Rabbi Yeshua Leib Diskin, Zech Tzadik Kodesh Livracha, answers everything in one full swoop. I think he doesn't say v'yochel v'yesh, I saw it elsewhere, but he explains that that's why Yaakov was careful to give him first the bread. And the bread satisfied him. So he wasn't ravenous anymore. And since Esav still took the Nazir Adoshim, so then the deal was on. And others say that the proof that he can't have a claim is after he ate, Vayokam Vayelech. He got up and he left. He didn't say, oh, no, I didn't mean it. I only had to do it. It was because of his Pikuach Nefesh. No, Vayokam Vayelech, he got up, he was happy. Vayivaz Esav Esav B'chayra. He despised it. So he forsook any possibility of a claim. Vayikra Shmai Esav, Vayikru Shmai Esav, and they called him Esav. And then afterwards his brother came out, Vayikra Shmo Yaakov. So Rashi notices that by Esav, it says, Rashi notices everything. So Rashi notices that by Esav it says Vayikra'u in the plural. And by Yaakov it says Vayikra. So Rashi says Vayikra'u is that everybody called him. They saw it was very unusual. He was born with a full head of hair and a beard and teeth and molars. So they called him Asu. He was complete. So everybody called him that. By Yaakov Vayikra, it's either Hashem or Yitzchak. So Reb Chaim Kanievsky explains, very, very fascinating. Reb Chaim Kanievsky explains that Esav, when he was born, because he was Admoni, red, they were afraid to give him Milah. Afraid that the blood didn't absorb. So they didn't give him Milah, so they didn't give him a name. So everybody called him Asu because he looked complete. Then when he became Bar Mitzvah and Yitzchak wanted to mal him, he said no. So he never got a name. So he only got the name that everybody gave him. Yaakov, of course, had a bris, so he got the name. So by the way, you see clearly that Yitzchak saw who Esav was. I mean, he didn't want to have a bris milah. He was an oral. It was mamish uncircumcised. And the Ramah Mipanu says a very fascinating thing over here. The Ramah Mipanu says that explains a grammatical pella. When Esav came in and found that Yaakov took his brachas, so he cried to his father, Berchoni gam oni avi. Bless me, I also, Father. So the Ramah Mipanu said that it would have made sense to say Berchoni gam oisi. Also me. What's the gam oni? So Ramah Mipanu says he didn't want to say oisi because ois is the milah. It's an ois beini ubeinechem, and he didn't want to remind Yitzchak that he doesn't have an ois. So that's why he didn't say Berchoni gam oisi. He said gam oni. Very, very clever. And now we come to a big subject. Big subject. Vayav Yitzchak es Esav kitzayid b'fiv. That Yitzchak loved Esav kitzayid b'fiv. Now, how could he love Esav? One shot is because the Targum says because he provided him with his provisions. You know, he gave him a good steak. And the other shot is that he fooled his father by asking him, do you take meiser from salt? So of course the question is, how could it be possible that Yitzchak could be fooled? First of all, we see that he refused to circumcise himself. It's mamish. It's an oral. Not only that, it says that he married women. They worshipped idolatry, which was a moiris ruach. It was a bitterness for Yitzchak and Esav. When Yitzchak and Rivka, when Yitzchak asked Esav to go and bring him the food, he said, "Sona kelecha, keliecha." It says kelecha. It says, Rashi says, make sure that the knife is good, that you shouldn't serve me nevela. He said, Kishanav Amusha B'ni, he heard Yaakov say that Kihikra Hashem Lefani, that's why it was so quick. He said, that's not my Esav, that's not my Esav. Shem Shemayim is not Sugar B'fiv. He knew Esav. So what's going on over here? So it's interesting, the Arizal, the Arizal explains that from Esav came, from Edom, came Shmaya Avtalion, one of the chains of the Messiah, came Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. And therefore, Yitzchak knew that Esav had to be handled with love, Kitzayid Befiv, because Yitzchak was capturing Befiv, Torah Sheba'al Peh. He was making sure that in Esav there should be enough, that there should come out of him Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's the way the Arizal learns. The Shach, written over 500 years ago, you know that I quote the Shach al HaTorah, one of the Gurei Arizal. The Shach also asks, what's Pshat Kitzayid Befiv? It's impossible to learn that Yitzchak was hoodwinked. So the Shach says, you're reading it wrong. Shaya Yitzchak Sod es Esav Befiv. Yitzchak was the one that trapped Esav with his mouth. Shaya Medaber Elav Raka. He spoke to him softly, lovingly, Kedei L'tzoydoi Le'aviu L'mutav, in order to ensnare him, to make him better. This is a very big yesod. You know, we find that the Avos HaKadoshim and the Imais had to instill and inject and inculcate in the Jewish bloodstream the DNA to handle the vicissitudes of life. If you remember, we said that Avram sent Yitzchak to Shem ve'Ever, although he was a Mezinikel, to give koyach to parents to send away their children to yeshiva. This is a koyach, right? The reason why we have Yitzchak, that he was willing to give his life at the Aguda, and Hashem didn't tell him to do it, is that it injects it into the bloodstream of Yidden to die al Kiddush Hashem, even when Hashem doesn't directly tell them to do it. This is another example. Esav was the first child that we call off the derech, at risk. Kip, kids in pain. Rabbi Yaakov Mordechai Greenwald tells the following story. I saw this story in the wonderful Sefer list, Adein Ba'avosecha. Rabbi Yaakov Mordechai Greenwald says that a woman came to him. She was married, he writes, she was married to a Talmud Chacham Mefursim, a well-known Talmud Chacham. Her sons and her son-in-laws were all Mitzuyonim B'Torah. But she had one son who was 17 years old, who lived at home. He wanted to live at home, but he didn't keep Shabbos. He didn't put on tefillin. He went out of the house to discos. He didn't eat kosher. He did all kinds of sins. And she came to Rav Greenwald and she said she's at her wit's end. She tried everything. She doesn't know what to do. So Rav Greenwald asked her, looked at her and asked her, do you love him? So she said, I love him, but I confess sometimes I hate him. So he said to her, I want you to close your eyes and meditate about how much Hashem loves us, even though we disappoint him so many times. That's what he told her. She went home, and she called him many years later. And she said, you know what you told me had such a reaction. I went home. My son would get up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He would be out the whole night. And we'd get up first at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I would set him a table for breakfast like in the Waldorf Astoria. And I served him a beautiful breakfast. At first he thought I was crazy. But I did that every morning. And he was very meticulous about his clothing. I did his wash. I sent his clothing to the cleaners. And I did that for him. He said, I want you to know that slowly he came back. He married a religious girl. And he has wonderful children. So Rav Greenwald says that he thought about it. And he thought about a difficult pasuk in Shir Hashirim. Pasuk in Shir Hashirim is in Perek Ches Pasuk Vav. The pasuk says, Ki oza kamoves ava. That love is as powerful as death. Now the idea is that nothing stays in the way of death. When it's time for somebody to die, they can't run away. They run to the Malach HaMavos. He says, Ava is as powerful as death. The power of a parent with Ava is incredible. You know that they say that in Ger there was a well-known phony, a well-known faker. He would come to the Rebbe dressed in a shtreimel and in a fancy bekisha, and he would prover, Chasidus, piety.